Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So as you guys can see by the title, this is going to be my 24 books that I hope to read in 2024. So I have this massive stack behind me, and then I also have this massive stack on the ground. There is a mix of different genres in here as well. So we've got some fantasy, we've got some thriller, we've got some dystopian, we've got some romance, we've got some Christian, we've got some non-fiction. So I'm filming this today on the 4th of January, and I haven't read any of these books. So last year I had put a couple in that I had already read because I was really excited for them. I did a video like this last year where I had a list of books that I wanted to read, and I read some of them and didn't read others, but I will talk about them in my end of year reading wrap up, which I don't know if that's up yet or not. If it's up, I'll link it down below, but if not, it's coming soon. Some of these are like starts of series, some of them are standalones. Some of these books I've owned for like a very long time, and others of them I'm just really excited to read, so I wanted to put them on this list and they're on my radar. Without further ado, let's jump into this video. So the first book that is on my radar for 2024 is Shadow and Bone by Leila. So I watched the TV show of this last year and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was done well. The magic was really good. It was pretty easy to understand as a visual, and I know sometimes when you're reading this it can be a little bit hard to understand. This book is set in the Grishaverse, so you have like the normal people and you have the Grisha people. The Grisha people have powers and the normal people don't, and the land is kind of set out, so you have like one town and civilization on one side, and then you have another civilization on another side, and you have something in the middle called the Fold, and there are like monsters that live in this fold, and you need to be able to cross the fold to be able to give resources back and forth between these two civilizations. And so it just follows one girl as she gets put on an expedition to cross the fold, and it just intrigues me so much. This is the start of a trilogy, but I've just put the first book on here on this list just so that I'm not gonna give myself too much. I am really excited for this one. This is like an OG book talk series that I just have not read. The next book on my list is The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. I picked up this one I think at the start of last year from Kmart, and I've just not got to it yet. This one is just like a little romance book. I'm not sure if it's adult or YA, but basically this girl owns a ballet studio, and the guy I think is buying the building because she is like struggling to like pay her rent. This guy is like her crush from high school or something that is buying this building, so it just seems really interesting. Just a very light-hearted, cute read. The next book that I have is one that I'm so excited for, and this will be my first time reading this series. It is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. So through 2023 I have been reading the ACTA series, and I have been loving that series, and so they always say to start with ACTA and then go to Throne of Glass. So I really want to finish ACTA this year, so I really want to be able to start Throne of Glass. I do think I want to read Assassin's Blade, which is the prequel, first. I know there's like different reading orders on what you can do it, but I think I do want to read that one first, but I specifically want to read Throne of Glass. This is like an 8-book series I think, but Sarah J. Maas is a really good fantasy writer. I think this series is YA, I could be wrong. The next book that is on my list is one that I have owned for such a long time, and it's also a really chunky book, so I just really want to get it off my physical TBR, and that is The Swarm. This is by Frank Schutzing. I don't know how you pronounce the surname. It looks like German or something, but it just says a novel of the deep. I love anything to do with the ocean. The ocean is like my happy place. It's where I feel calm a lot of the time. So if I'm really stressed or really anxious, a lot of the time I like to just go and sit down by the ocean and just look at the ocean, just see how far it goes. And there's something about looking at the ocean that just makes me feel small and makes me feel like my problems are really small. So I love anything to do with the ocean. So this book just, I think it's a science fiction, but it just seems like something is happening in the ocean The tides and currents aren't working the way that they normally do. Ships are sinking, fishermen are drowning, wildlife is not doing what it's supposed to do, and it just seems really interesting. It is a thick book though, oh my goodness. This is 873 pages. It's a chunker, but I just really want to get it off my shelf. If I love this, obviously I will definitely keep this, but if it's a bit like average, I will just donate it. Because it's so chunky. Could be one of the longer books on this list actually that I would like to read. Next up we have another popular BookTok book that I just have not got to yet, and that is Where the Croads Sing. Now this is by, is it Delia Owens or Delia Owens? I never know how you pronounce this. I started watching the movie for this, but I've just not finished it and I kind of just forgot about it. It basically just follows this girl who grows up in like marshlands, which is kind of similar vibes to like a swamp, and then they find a body in this marshland, and so they think that she is the one that has killed them, but she is trying to prove her innocence. So seems really interesting. It is a mystery book. I don't know if it's YA or adult. I know this book has mixed reviews. I know some people love it and some people hate it, so I just want to read it and see what I think. Next up on this list again is another popular BookTok book. It's one that I've got my hands on recently and I have just not stopped thinking about it. Like, it was to the point where like I was watching a review of this for like just someone talking about it, and then I had a dream about it. I haven't even read the book yet, so this is why I'm like, okay, I really need to read this. And that is 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. So this one is a YA thriller, which is great. I love YA thrillers because they're not too intense to read, but they're still good to like get your adrenaline pumping, and I've heard that this is one of those books that does that. Just says 8 hours, 6 friends, 1 sniper. Basically this just follows 6 friends who are traveling in this RV, and I think their RV breaks down and then someone starts shooting at them, and so I think they're just trying to figure out like why this person is shooting at them and who it is and what they want. And it'll be like told at night because it's like set over 8 hours at night. I also imagine I will fly through this, so really want to get this done. And I also want to cut down the amount of thrillers that I own. If you guys do want to see a bookshelf tour, by the way, I did film one last year, so I will leave that video down below and in the eye of me like organizing it, because I've organized my bookshelf by genre and it's such a game changer. And I really am trying to like work on my physical TBR. I apologize if I'm in a slightly different position. My battery just died, so I have just changed it over to the other one. Keeping with the thrillers, the next book on my list is Leila by Colleen Hoover. So in 2023 I read quite a lot of Colleen Hoover's books. I read Verity, which was the other one of her thrillers, and I loved it. I thought it was written so well. Almost hard to believe that it's Colleen Hoover that has written it, because her writing style is just so different between the different genres, which obviously is a good thing. But I would love to read this one here just to kind of tick it off. But I gave this book to my friend Tabby to borrow, and she said it was good. She didn't say it was as good as Verity, but she said it was still good, and it still like gets your adrenaline pumping, and it's still completely like you're left thinking like, what on earth? And I love books that do that, so I am really excited for this one. It says love can haunt or heal. So it follows Leila, and it seems like she is left in a accident fighting for her life, and then she recovers, but then there's some sort of like mental thing that has altered her, and then she just starts acting really weird, and her partner is just trying to figure out what on earth has happened in that surgery to her. Seems very interesting. Colleen Hoover books are always really easy for me to binge. Like, I read them really fast, and they're also a really good palate cleanser, so I am really excited to get to this one this year. So the next book on my list for 2024 is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. Now this is one of Rachel Catherine's favorite books of all time, and I really trust her recommendations because a lot of the books that she loves I also really love, and a lot of the books that she's a bit like about were books that I was a bit about. So I am really excited for this. I bought my copy from Amazon AUS, but I think they are now stocking this in Whitcoulls, which is really exciting. So follows this girl who I think she moves to a small town. She seems to be like running from a life, and she meets Archer and just thinks he's like really rude because he just doesn't speak, and then everyone in the town is like, oh no, like he doesn't speak at all, like it's not just to you, like he doesn't speak to anyone in general. And so she's really intrigued and she like wants to get to know him and try to understand his story, and I just think it's so sweet. It is a romance book, but I don't know if he's gonna be deaf or not, or if it's going to be some sort of other thing where he just doesn't talk. But if it is to do with deafness, I'm going to relate to that a lot because my youngest sister is deaf. Next up we have a Christian non-fiction book. So for those of you who don't know, I am Christian. I like to read a Christian non-fiction book alongside my Bible reading, and also alongside the Christian non-fiction book that my husband and I will read together. So one that is on my radar for this year is this one here. Now this one is Christianity on Trial by Colin Chapman. It says, who am I? What's the point? What is love? Why suffering? What hope is there? And can we fight evil? So I'm pretty sure that this is told by a lawyer who is trying to prove case for Christianity as if he were in a court of law, which I think is just so fascinating. I would love to read this so I have like a little bit more evidence that I can also give to people myself. I think this will be a book that really helps my growth as a Christian. The writing is quite small, so that's gonna be fun. But I have on my list, or my goals list for this year, that I want to read 5 Christian non-fiction books, and I would love for this to be one of them. The next book that we have on my list I am so excited for, and I have been wanting to read this, but I feel like the end of 2023 was not a good time to start a series, and considering I am in the middle of literally like so many series right now, I was like, no. Now that it's a new year, I'm really excited for this book here. So this one is Sham Me by Tahara Murphy. Now I totally did not realize, but Tahara Murphy is married to Ransom Briggs, who writes the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series, and that series is honestly one of my most favorite series of all time. So once I found out she was married to him, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, because I had no idea when I bought this book. But I know that this has been really popular on Book Talk. So this one is a dystopian series. I actually don't know how many books are in the series. I'm gonna write it up here how many are in the series, because there's also like little novellas and stuff which I do want to read. But this one, the main character in this has lethal touch, so basically anyone that she touches dies. So she's locked up in the re-establishment, which is kind of like the new world order. So society has obviously like collapsed, and the re-establishment are the ones who are like in control of everything, and they're kind of like the government, and they have her locked up in a cell because she has lethal touch, and they're worried about obviously her getting out and killing people. But then I think she manages to escape, and the series kind of goes from there. So that concept sounds so interesting to me, and dystopian and romance are like the 2 genres that I read the most. Like anything dystopian, I'm like, sign me up. So I'm really excited for this. It seems like a really short book. Obviously it is part of a series, but I imagine I will fly through this series. And then the last book in my first stash on the ground is this one. This one is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Now I have heard so many people rave about this book. I've also had comments from you guys being like, oh my gosh, you need to read The Night Circus, like it's so good. So I really want to get to it this year. Basically it's told and following a circus. They appear for one night and then they're gone the next. That's pretty much it. Literally on the back it just says the circus arrives without warning, no announcements precede it. It is simply there when yesterday it was not. And it's won awards and things. So I am really excited. I have literally owned this book for so long. This one is a fantasy book as well. And it's also a fantasy standalone, which is really nice because you don't get many fantasy standalones these days. Again, I don't know how intense the fantasy element is. I'm very new to fantasy. Then we get to this stash, which I am very excited to get to because this is the last stash that we have. So the first book in this stash that I want to read is Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. So this is the second book in the like Magnolia Parks world. I read Magnolia Parks in 2023 and I loved it. Obviously like the relationships are very toxic. There is a lot of toxicity in these books. It has the biggest miscommunication trope that you will ever find in a book. Somehow it just works and I can't explain why. I don't know if it's just the way that Jessa Hastings writes that actually makes it tolerable, but Daisy Hates is a character that we meet in Magnolia Parks. But this is like her story. So she has 2 books in the series, which I think her books are continuing. Magnolia has 3, which the 3rd one is due to come out this year, and then she is done. I am excited to read this. So I think in this book you get Daisy Hate's, Christian, and possibly Julian's point of view as well. She is the sister of London's most notorious gang lord, so it'll be very interesting. I also just love these covers. These are the old covers, which I don't know if you can get these specific covers anymore. You might be able to get some of them, or maybe not all of them, but I just got mine from Whitcoulls, so hopefully they still stock them. And I love these covers, and the person who designed this cover, it was their like debut covers, which I just think is incredible. Next up is a series that I did not read when I was younger. It's probably the only like kind of like urban fantasy world that I did not get into, but that is the Mortal Instruments City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. So I watched the movie to this and I loved it. My sister actually used to own these books and she then gave them to me, but I feel like when this was released it was kind of as I was starting to get a little bit older, so I just never ever got to it, and I really want to read it. But basically it is set in like the real world, but there's like a spiritual world alongside this world that some people can see and some people can't. And so I think you follow Clary, is that her name? Yeah, Clary, who she comes home one day and her mum is missing, and then she goes out to try and find her mum, and she ends up in this club where she sees this guy stab another guy. She asks like her friend like, oh my gosh, did you just see that, like the guy just killed that guy? And he was like, there's no one there. Then she realizes that she can see this like spiritual world, and I think it follows her quest to try and find her mum. So this is the first book out of 6, and then there is also a prequel series which follows like the parents, I think, called The Infernal Devices, and then there's also a series that follows these characters' children, which I think is called The Dark Artificers. I could be wrong, but I feel like the Mortal Instruments is a good place to start. I haven't started this yet because I feel like this is giving more like autumnal wintry vibes, because I definitely want to read more like fantasy and thriller through like the autumn winter, and then more like romance dystopian through the summers. Next book on this list is another book by Nicholas Sparks. So this one is The Choice and says, how far would you go to keep the hope of love alive? And I'm pretty sure that this is a movie as well. This one is about a guy who seems to have everything that he could want. This girl moves in next door. He attempts to be friendly, but she's like real standoffish, so it seems like she is a Grumpy Sunshine, so it's like Grumpy Sunshine reversed. And so it's just like a little romance book. Like Nicholas Sparks is a romance writer, and I've read a couple of books by him, actually a few books by him, and I do enjoy them, but I feel like the romance and the writing isn't very deep, so they're really easy to read. They're also really short books, so I really want to read this and just get it off my physical TBR, if I'm honest. Next up we have the big chunky trusty A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. So this is the last book that is out at the moment in the ACOTAR series. The ACOTAR series is an ongoing series, but this is book 5. I want to finish the ACOTAR series again. I want to finish this series so I can start Throne of Glass. But this one is told from Nesta and Cassian's point of view. So Nesta is Feyre's sister, and Feyre is like the main character in ACOTAR, Akamath, and Akawar, and I'm guessing Akavas as well. But I love this series. I do think it is worth the hype. It is a very easy fantasy world to understand. Like the politics aren't that complicated. The world is really easy. I love the map in the start of the book. I'm constantly referring to it. The only thing I feel like would make this series better is if you had a list at the front of all of the magical creatures and what their powers are, because sometimes I get really confused between them. I'm not very good with names of things. I think this series is written very, very well. If you want to read fantasy and you're not sure where to start, definitely start with ACOTAR, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book, which I read in 2023. The next book on my list is a book that my husband has read. Okay, I think this was actually a pick that my husband put on my 24 books in 2024. I asked him to give me like 5 books to put on. It's one that I really want to read as well. This one is Zoo by James Patterson. I watched the TV show for this and I loved it. Specifically, I really enjoyed the first season and the second season. I feel like they kind of dropped off a little bit in the third season, and then the show got discontinued, so that sucked. But basically what happens in this book is the animals, like literally they all band together and gang up on humans. So normally humans are like the apex predator. In this book you're following a team of scientists who are trying to figure out what on earth is changing the animals' behavior and why they are suddenly working as a collective, as like the animal kingdom, against the human world. And I just think that's so interesting. Like on the front it says something very bad is happening out there. This is a science fiction book, I believe. It's a little bit chunky but not too bad. My dad I think has a few of his books, but I am really excited to give this a go and see what I think. Phil loved it as well. Rachel borrowed it at one point, but I don't know if she started it or if she read some of it. I actually don't know. Next up we have a book that I got off of Rachel Catherine's recommendation, and that is Bunny by Mona Awad. This takes place I think at a high school or a college. It follows a girl who is new to this school or college, and there's a bunch of girls who I think are like the popular group, or like what would deem as like popular group, and they're all just a bit like strange I think, and they all call each other Bunny, and there's just like a lot of really odd things about this group and about this school, and it just seems really interesting. This one I think is classified as a general fiction. I think on the back it says that it's a sharp satire with fairy tale horror. Next up we have a new book that I have recently thrifted, and that is this one here. So this one is Breathless by Amy McCulloch. So Amy McCulloch is the editor for Zoe Sugg and her books. So when I saw this I was really excited to give it a go and see what I thought. Again, this will be one that I will read in the winter time because it's giving very like wintry vibes. But this one is a thriller. It says there's a killer on the mountain and you might be next. So there is a journalist who seems to be invited on an expedition to go to like one of the world's tallest mountains, and I think they start to climb up, and then temperatures and the situations up there just aren't great, and then they find like a murderer on the mountain. I don't know if he kills one of their own or if they find a body, I'm not sure. Says there's a theft, then an accident, then a mysterious note pinned to her tent. So seems very interesting. I don't know if this is YA or if it's adult. I would assume it's YA because Amy McCulloch edits for Zoe Sugg, who is a YA author, and she has written YA thriller, so I'm just assuming. I could be totally wrong, but yeah, this just definitely gives very wintry vibes, and I feel like I'll get the most out of it reading it in winter. Next on this list we have a non-fiction book. So I have this one here. Now this one is The Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Emma Carey. This one is a memoir. So basically she was going skydiving I think when she was in her early 20s, and basically her parachute didn't open, and so she free fell right to the ground. And then I think it just talks about her courage, her resilience, her basically learning to do life again after this fall. And it does also have pictures and things in it as well, which I just think will be interesting. I actually really enjoy reading memoirs. I've read a few now, and I just find other people's lives so interesting, so I really want to read this and read her story. And I feel like books like this can just teach you a lot about life and how fragile it is, and also like what is most important in life. Next up we have another book, which is another start of a series, so I'm hoping that I can finish some of my already existing series before I read some more series. Again, this book was my husband's pick, and that is Gone. So this one is written by Michael Grant. I have had this book on my shelf for so long, and I think I've got the second book as well, and I just really want to read it and see what I think. It is a dystopian series. I think my husband has read the first book, but I could be wrong. Basically it says that it's suddenly a world without adults. Normal life has crashed and burned, and it ends at age 15. So basically everyone at the age of 15 just all of a sudden randomly disappears, and they're not sure why. And I think it's just a book that's trying to figure out where everyone has gone and what has happened to them. So it sounds really interesting. This next book again was my husband's pick, but I actually got this recommendation off of Rachel Catherine because she read this book, and that is this one here. So this one is The Dry by Jane Harper. I think Jane Harper is an Australian author because all of her books are set in Australia. Now I have kind of spoiled this myself because I watched the movie, but I did really enjoy the movie, and my husband also said that he wants to read this as well. But this one is a thriller. I don't know if it's a YA or an adult thriller, but I feel like because I already know what happens, it's less scary for me. This is like a small town where everyone knows everyone. This family is like brutally murdered, and they're just trying to figure out who did it, basically. So it's just like a whodunit book kind of thing. We're almost done. We have 3 books left. So the next book in this list is again a Christian non-fiction book that I want to read, and that is this one here. So this one is the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I feel like this and Mere Christianity are like, apart from the Narnia series, are 2 of C.S. Lewis's most popular books. This one basically is telling the story of an older demon teaching a younger demon how to basically be a demon, how to like tempt people and how to just influence them. And I think it'll be very eye-opening to see how the devil works in your life to try and lead you astray from God. And so very intrigued. I like that C.S. Lewis can come up with concepts like this, and I know a lot of people really love this book, and a lot of the elders at my church back home in Hawke's Bay have recommended this to me. It is on the front, a view of our world from the dark depths of hell. Alright, the second to last book again is my husband's pick. These last 2 are actually his picks that he has put on this list. But we have 2 for 2 by Nicholas Sparks. I asked my husband why he chose this, and he said because it's a thick book and you've owned it for a while. So this one, it just says it's another guy who seems to have it all, but it seems that like not everything is as it seems. He just seems to have a lot on his plate. Life seems to be throwing him something that he has not been prepared for, and I think maybe he's just struggling through it. So it might be a story of like perseverance and finding joy in the small things. But we'll see how we go. Obviously I do have a lot of Nicholas Sparks books on my shelf, so I really just want to be able to keep my favorite ones. Again, I feel like his writing is good, but it doesn't go into like too much depth. He doesn't describe things a whole heap. He just kind of tells you what's happening rather than like dives deep into like plots and descriptions and things like that. So we'll see how we go, but I do find his books very bingeable. And then the last book that I have on my list, the 24th book of the books that I want to read in 2024, is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. So again, I have not read anything from this author before. I have watched the movie to this, and the movie kind of like unsettled me a little bit, but I think the book will be written better, so we'll see how we go. My husband has read this as well, and he really enjoyed it and said it was really good. I told from the guy's point of view, where his wife suddenly disappears and the police suspect him. The girl's friends are all telling the police that like her husband's not a great guy and stuff like that. He is basically like, no, they're lying, like I promise I didn't do anything to her. So it's kind of like a investigation to try and figure out where his wife has gone and what has actually happened to her, and why everyone suddenly is seeming to be against him. So I imagine it'll be fast paced. I'm just like a little bit intimidated by this book. I don't know why, but again, I'm trying to get through some thrillers this year and get them off the shelf. And there we go, guys. We have got to the end of my 24 books that I want to read in 2024. Definitely stay tuned on my channel if you want to see me read some of these books. Also let me know if there are any of these books in particular that you want to see in a reading vlog, because I also can do that as well. Let me know as well if you guys have read any of these books that are on my list. No spoilers, but just let me know your thoughts. Also, if you are planning to read any of these books this year as well, let me know that as well. Or also just in general, let me know what you want to read this year. I would be very keen to know. I do have some other videos in a reading series here on my channel as well, so if you want to watch more book related content, I'll leave that down below for you guys as well. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Please make sure to turn on the notifications and check out my social media. It's always linked down below in the description box, and I think that is everything. So I shall see you guys in my next video. Bye!